Wow. Just came right in from the airport.
Yes.
Just literally disembarked. Dave Weigel, Washington Post, the national political correspondent.
That seems right. Yeah. I did get off a plane, so let me shake off the jet lag and tiny bottles of things. I think that's accurate.
And where were you coming from?
Just from D.C.
Okay.
The home of the grassroots.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let me go over. Let me just do the obligatory sort of retrospective on Netroots.
Yeah.
I know you just literally just got here, so you haven't taken stock of what's going on here. I know you went to ones way back, right?
Oh yeah. I skipped a couple, but I've been coming since 2007, basically. Yeah.
And tell me your perspective on it, because I mean at that time you were writing for.
It was Reason, the libertarian magazine.
You were.
And actually, the first one I kind of just went to on my own vacation time. I just was interested. I'm not sure I wrote a story about it. I just wanted to meet people and talk to. I ended up writing a couple things, talking to candidates. Remember, there was at that point an effort. Marcos was part of this to convince libertarians to vote Democratic.
Yeah,
they had a couple
forget that he was going to write a book.
Libertarian Democrats.
Yeah, about libertarian Democrats.
Absolutely, which is not coming back the way maybe it should. I mean, I came there and wrote political stories, and then in 2009 went to Pittsburgh, which was I think that's still the only one I've been to where Democrats ran everything and everyone was really miserable. Everyone was unhappy in Pittsburgh. I was at the ones where I think 2011 in Minneapolis, where the last year that Right Online, the Coke thing, was next door.
That's right.
And then I think I've basically been coming since 2013 every year. And the mood has been shifting. There was a period, frankly, I mean, the blogs that founded this thing, many of them don't exist. I'll often make a reference to MyDD, and like 6 people on the internet understand what I'm talking about. But it's become an activist convention, and for a while, from media terms, I mean, for a while, there'd be Netroots where I was listening to a speech in the main hall, and there were like 3 other reporters in the room. I think it's bumped up since then, because the left is interesting, again, for people.
I think that's true. I've seen already more reporters here than I anticipated.
Yeah. Some outlets, I think I'm the only person from the Post, but I know, like, BuzzFeed sent 3 people, and a couple TV networks sent people, and there's a lot of the left.
Here.
There's a lot of we've talked to literally every voter at a diner about why they love Trump. So it's time to start talking to the other people.
What do you think explains that phenomenon? I mean, we look at the mentions of Democrats and Republicans in the Post and the Times, completely unbalanced. When Democrats were in power, all the Sunday shows would have Republicans on because the Republicans are out of power.
Right.
You don't see that dynamic flipped. Maybe a little bit has changed, but it's not as stark.
It's not. Well, I don't know. I think at the Post, I've been given this free rein to cover Democrats, and the stories get published. And I wrote a profile of DSA that was on the front page a week ago. I think print has been doing a better job. But you're right. There is the part of it I think is fighting the last war, which is a lot of media outlets, I think incorrectly, thought they didn't cover Trump country enough. There was a ton of coverage of Trump voters. There's like a ton. Because the story was, why are people interested in this? It's a mystery to us. It's still, when reporters go listen to him talk for an hour and invoke all his enemies and whether Kardashians are mean to him, there's still a question of why this is so popular. Part of it, I think, is just just a little bit of roteness of saying, well, Democrats are in disarray. Are they falling apart? How are they going to blow it? And there hasn't been a lot of fresh thinking on how to cover that. It probably changed in the last month. I mean, I was in Michigan last weekend with a couple campaigns, and I noticed the press corps covering Abdullah Syed, who's the Bernie Sanders endorsed candidate for governor, was like an early Iowa caucus level press corps. I'd say every event he did, there were about 20 reporters pointing reporters at him, and I should say he was with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I think that race sort of nudged people into covering the left more seriously. But for 18 months, you're right. And the Sunday show thing is a constant source of frustration to me. Just I like voices. Whatever one thinks. I'm not saying all voices are equal. I think it's interesting to have maybe a socialist debating a nationalist and then some other people. Most of the Sunday shows, even beyond the guests, the panels are, well, here we have a conservative, an anti-Trump conservative, an expert on conservative economics, and a straight mainstream media reporter, so there is like a denuding of the left's voice in a lot of media, which I don't like, just because I want to hear what people are saying.
Let's talk about your story on the DSA.
Yeah.
Give us a sense of where, my sense is that you're one of the few reporters who sort of saw some of this bubbling up a little bit. I mean, I know that you, on some level, enjoyed the fact that you had the whole playing field to yourself.
A little bit,
for a while. Give me your sense of just how sort of, I guess, broad-based the DSA is becoming. I mean, beyond it seems to me it's having an outsized influence for its like specific membership.
Yeah, well, I think it's because the word socialist is so bracing to people and so new. It's not shocking anymore. To be a campus conservative is actually pretty ordinary. There's a lot of that. We've covered them. I think I just read my umpteenth profile of Charlie Kirk on the plane here, the guy who runs Turnpike USA. The idea that people want to identify as socialists is still fairly fresh, and for that reason they're getting a lot of attention. You know, the Working Families Party, just saying the name, you have to explain what it is, how it's not a political party in all places. Center for Popular Democracy also has lots of words in it. Democratic Socialists of America, you're starting with grabbing somebody's collar and saying, hey, like, we're different, we don't care what you think, and we're radical. And we have they're not everybody who has a bold message you want to stop in the street and talk to. If like Hare Krishnas are like, hey, we want to talk to you about our cult, please join. Maybe not. But if somebody says, I'm a socialist, you can either hyperventilate about Venezuela or talk to them. I think they're just more interested in what they stand for. The point of that story was I thought there'd been a lot of that surface, who are these guys stories, not a lot of detail about how they actually operated, which is very transparent. If you're a reporter, I've never once, I was at the DSA convention in Chicago, and they took a vote on whether to let me stay in a room because one person in the room didn't like the Washington Post op-eds about Edward Snowden, and Chelsea Manning, I think, both of them. And it was like a 8-1 let Dave stay vote, which no chance, which would have been cool if there were a chance of let Dave stay, but it was just like a show of hands. Everything else, you show up, you can ask, and they're excited to explain what they stand for. And to me, it is as a reporter, similar to covering the early Tea Party. There was a big AstroTurf side of that, the biggest side of that. There were honestly also retirees who worried that Obamacare meant they'd be killed by government doctors, and they'd invite you into the room and say, okay, we're having a meeting of 30 people, here's what we're talking about, here's the books we're reading, here's our ideology. It's interesting, let's do the same thing with the left. But that's why the DSA the numbers are impressive. You can count the surge from I think 6,000 people to 45,000 in 2 years, and then the branding is so unexpected that it's
is it just a function of use? I mean, so DSA was started by Harrington, right?
Right,
and
82.
Joanne Mort, I think, was also involved in that. I mean, and rather low key over the past 30 years.
Yeah, it had a heyday in the 80s. Harrington died. Ron Dellums left Congress. Greg Meeks was a DSA member, left Congress. But it wasn't. It was kind of yet another lapel on your TGI Fridays vest. I'm a DSA member. As an organizing force, it was not that potent. I for the story, it kind of got cut out, but I just did the web archive search and looked at 2 years ago how many DSA chapters there were around the country. So it was every big city and a couple of college towns had a DSA chapter. Nothing you wouldn't expect. So the newness of them forming, I think there are 5 in Iowa, there's 7 or 8 in Texas. The newness of any area where there's young people at all and they have not experienced economic opportunity and they've been screwed over on, which is, I think, all people under 30, you're finding everywhere. And I think it's continued to drop. When I wrote my first DSA story from their convention in 2017, the average age had dropped by like 30 years to the early 30s. And I think it's still around there. The average DSA member basically like grad student age now, where they used to be senior citizens.
And what's fascinating is you compare, like, I mean, if I was to look at the youth and look at the right, and you look at the Turning Points thing that they just did with the high school students, right? Where they brought in Seb Gorka, they brought the whole sort of like super friends on the right.
Yeah.
They're all there paid.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, Seb Gorka's not going there. He's getting paid money. Kirk is getting paid money. Kirk has a ton of money that is available for a budget. It gets really stark at that level, right? Like these DSA groups, like there's no big funders behind this. There's no.
You add up all of the dues that they get, and it's probably close to 1.8 million for an organization of 45,000 people with active chapters. And I think Turning Point USA has maybe twice as many members and more than $10 million. And it's all top down. And frankly, conservative organizations like the Trump campaign, like the RNC right now, also have a revenue stream of let's send direct mail to seniors and get them scared and have them give them a $100 check, which DSA doesn't have. What I think there is camaraderie in, like, I guess, the literal sense of people being comrades. People in DSA like to hang out with each other. There are some chapters that have had, so a little bit of interscene squabble and fights like you're going to have if group gets more than 2 people big. A lot of the DSA meetings I've gone to have just been, oh yeah, we're going to this bar. Come to the bar. We're going to hang out. What would you normally do? We normally go to the bar. Really? Come to this barbecue. We always have that. You look at Metro DSA, obviously was the most visible in DC. You look at their events page. It's like every night you can do something. Not that you need to. Not that you're being drilled and conditioned. It's just, if you want to hang out at this thing, we're going to go to this baseball game. And the direct actions, which I actually got some angry mail because people thought I was endorsing them. I said it's been a good summer for DSA. They made, in like space of 5 days, they like heckled Kirstjen Nielsen out of a restaurant and won this election. People saying, were you rooting for that? And I was like, no. I'm explaining through these members' voices is that heckling and no platforming people is part of the camaraderie. And I remember Josh Androsky from the LA chapter was saying, well, once you've locked arms and blocked the mayor of LA from leaving his inauguration party to protest like his homeless policy, you're going to want to get a beer after. You're going to be friends with those people. That's definitely part of it.
It's interesting because out of Netroots, 10 years ago came that whole liberally drinking. Do you remember that?
Drinking liberally, yeah.
Drinking liberally, and the theory was the same, right? You got to build up, to some extent it was, we don't have unions anymore.
Right.
We need to build up relationships, social relationships. This is sort of putting the politics first and the socializing around the politics.
Yeah, totally.
Versus the liberally drinking, which was like, we're going to do a social event and bring people together. It's just interesting for me to see that difference and
it's
how
more
it's playing.
It's more of a lifestyle, and it's also much more interactive. Just like Netroots is more interactive. I mean, you were talking about the Sebastian Gorka and people lecturing college students. That what I find, and maybe
it's
I've
like
said
a Comic-Con.
But
things, right?
it is in the literal sense that Comic-Con now is a lot of let's all wait in line, go to this big arena where we're going to see like 30 seconds of clips from the new Marvel movie. I found that conservative events, and this is a generalization from 12 years of covering it, they generally, even if they skew young, that one skewed young, even if they skew, especially if they skew older, it's a lot of, we're having a conference, come to the auditorium from 10 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m., you're going to hear speeches. This Netroots, the longest run of speeches is what, about 90 minutes, 2 hours?
Right.
It's a lot of, all right, here are these people, if you want to heckle them. Please don't, but what are you going to do? And then go hang out, go to a panel, go meet people and strategize on your own. It's much more independently directed, which has always been a Netroots thing, and I think that's helped it kind of thrive as some other, but left and right. I mean, that old Coke Right Online conference is basically down to 6 people in a phone booth now.
I mean, explain that was a conference that would shadow Netroots Nation, and I just remember Breitbart. It would basically be the way for Breitbart to show up.
Yeah, Breitbart would show up and give like a 30-minute speech, and
try and bust through the door.
But everyone else, like Louis Gohmert, would show up to that thing, no matter. He would fly from East Texas to wherever they were having the trolling convention, and that was also directed to. It was like 10% direct on here's some techniques that you can use, and 90% here is like the I will say 2 minutes like not indoctrination, that's a super loaded word, but basically that. Here is stuff to believe. Here's stuff that it's a little bit familiar because you've seen it on Fox. We're going to give you more of it. Here, the only thing, I mean, your show, TYT, a little bit of Chapo. There's like some samizdat liberal media, but nothing that really captures what you hear here.
Yeah, let me just ask you about this in terms of about that question, because
sure.
Someone interviewed me recently from I think it was Who, What, Why. Do you know that?
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
But that mental process that you just had to go to. Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
If I was doing this on the right.
Yeah.
You would know all the publications I said that would just called me for an interview, and really the interview was just about why don't you guys get any funding? What do you having traversed? Because you've traversed a certain ideology in terms of your reporting over the past dozen some odd years. What do you make of that? What do you make of the fact? I mean, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But what do you make of the fact that on the right there is this sort of seamlessness between the sort of haute, spreading of ideology and low spreading of ideology. And I don't want to consider myself to be low, but this, doing this is not considered as important as being in a think tank. Fine.
Sure.
But the Nation, the American Prospect, in these times, Mother Jones, they'll write about Ben Shapiro in moments. They will never write about the folks that sit here.
Well, that's interesting. I think it's a function of the people in the press generally are worried about sounding too liberal, looking like they're just uplifting a liberal or two. I'm actually surprised.
I mean, the Nation?
Yeah. But even that, if it's looking like you're kind of being PR for somebody, I feel like there's more worry about that than there is on the right in just the media side. I'm actually surprised this year that, there's a account like Stacey Abrams I've literally not read. Stacey Abrams and Better at Work have gotten the best press of. I think close third would be Abdul al-Sayed, who still is down in the polls, not the favorite to win that governor's race. There's still just profiles of check out this exciting person who's changing everything. I'm surprised the right's not doing more of that. But I think it's a little bit of overcorrection because you're worried of just looking like you're a homer who wants your side to succeed.
I mean, Chapo, and I guess we see it with Pod Save America too on some level. Chapo got more press as a left outlet, and I'm talking 4 articles maybe.
Yeah.
But that was far more than I had ever seen for, and I guess maybe in its time, Air America had a lot of press.
There's usually, will they fail? Oh, they're failing. That kind of. You were there.
Right.
it was all.
Well, that was actually the story.
It was
will they fail? Oh, they're failing.
Yeah.
To be fair, that was.
I'm not blaming you to say. I'm just saying the coverage was. This seems like it'll be hard. Let's see. Let's watch this guy walk a tightrope and see. But pay attention when he wobbles. Yeah.
But I mean, it's sort of surprising to me there aren't more stories about even the Chapo individuals, because they're a pretty big story.
I'm surprised, though. I always ask people who do not super closely follow politics. I'm in a state where I'm talking to voters. I'll notice if somebody has a Pod Save America or a TYT shirt. Those are probably the most common.
Right.
Here, I listen to liberal media, things I see. I'm surprised many people don't actually know what Chapo is. There's super fans who have their merch, and I'll talk to people who are very left-wing, and they're like, oh, yeah, I heard that, I guess. And they haven't really been clued in.
Well, it's YouTube.
Yeah, it's YouTube, yes.
YouTube has has a far greater reach.
Okay.
So that's my theory. It's just that if there are 20,000 people who are supporting Chapo, and if they get, I don't know, 60,000 downloads per episode, the universe of people who sample it is smaller than on YouTube, because we're getting 5 million views. They're not all unique views on YouTube, and we're still a podcast business, but 5 million views on YouTube. The number of unique people involved in that is necessarily going to be higher, and so and the visual thing I think people associate more. That's interesting, but TYTs, you go everywhere. Anybody who's at random, it seems to me, has a lot of TYT has been able to sort of like reach a lot of different people.
It's the one that has, and they have a lot of original reporting, which I think stands out. But the reporting, I'm kind of laughing because you sometimes you'll hear like a right-wing YouTube person, call herself investigative reporter because she goes and yells at people on camera.
Right. Yes.
But I mean, the TYT kind of reporting is just, they've done, and The Intercept has done a lot of, hey, there's a candidate running. Will they win? They're interesting. Let's do like a 30-minute interview with them, which is actually extremely bold and new. It's not, will this person, because a lot, I'm always, everything for me comes back to this mainstream media perspective, is what I know. A lot of it is like, okay, they're running. What does this tell us about the future of the party? What does this tell us about whether they can win? What does this tell us about 2020? Whereas the new liberal and left-wing media is just person seems cool. Let's just have them on for an hour to talk about healthcare.
Like interesting. The ideas on some level are interesting. The
right doesn't do that as much as they could. I think Fox has kind of brought the whole thing down with it in terms of ideas and focus. Just Fox is beyond the hits being short, beyond them being 5-minute hits. They're all outraged of the day. Here's what Hillary Clinton did. Their business coverage is just tax cuts are great. There's not much investigation. And there's a sort of coverage that I forget who used the term first. I borrowed it. I call point and sputter, which is there's not really an argument. It's just like, but you're not allowed to. That's you can't do that. And that's like 90% of the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez coverage. Like you've seen the videos where conservatives edit her to look stupider, and it's just them in the other frame. They literally don't want to debate the idea. They just say, but Venezuela, and that's it. And I think I found this in power, the right getting a little bit lazier, maybe a lot lazier about actually interpreting left-wing ideas. The media I'm in has to like find a frame, so left-wing media's filling the gaps. Like, okay, well here's a giant profile. Here's what all these Black Lives Matter people stand for. Here's their agenda. You want to know the agenda? Here it is.
They have not had to deal with, and people can get picky about exactly where these ideas are on the ideological spectrum. Is Bernie Sanders?
These are not radical ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, he is in many respects, raising ideas that have been raised in the Democratic Party for over the past decades. Nevertheless, it's definitely a set of ideas that the right has not had to contend with for the 30 years that they've been building on, and without, and they don't seem to be equipped to do it, right? Like,
no,
it just
It's like, and as someone who covers elections very closely, I noticed this in like election rhetoric. Trump was had Trump run on like the Paul Ryan economic agenda, he would have lost. Michigan would not have voted for Trump, even with it was 47.5% and the 3 candidates. He had
the 10,000 votes,
so forth and so on. Right. Jill Stein, yada yada. He wouldn't have got that close had he said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take away pre-existing condition protections, and we're going to block grant Medicaid. Nope. What he said was, I'm going to protect your Medicare, Social Security. And it wasn't that radical, because a lot of Republicans campaigns I see when they're in like a hole actually go to that well. And they won't attack the whole. There is no constituency for, if elected, I'm going to be bold and cut Social Security. It's been really 8 years of attacking Democrats, because if they voted for the ACA, they voted to shrink long-term Medicare spending.
Right.
Probably the most popular little October ad I see is Republicans saying such and such voted with Pelosi to take $800 billion out of Medicare. And I found the messaging against Medicare for all right now is not Medicare is bad. It's Medicare is great. There would be less of it if they spread it to these other people. So there's not at all an argument saying, you know what works? Markets. Markets are great. Markets are going to fix everything. Less for you, just going to spread it around. The only thing I think they've advanced the ball on ideologically is work requirements for stuff, which is, Democratic position is if you're alive, you should be able to get health care. If you're out of work, you should get benefits. If you're disabled. The only thing Republicans have been kind of pushing is, well, yeah, okay, but you need to require you to work 60 hours a month or something like that.
Right.
But they no longer argue whether it should exist or not. And I think part of that is just their media kind of, there's a little bit of it that just kind of chews its own tail, like the New Criterion and National Review and things like that. And then the big populist media, you can't be populist if you're advocating ideas that like 10% of the country wants.
Now, why do you think that the weird thing is that I feel like the mainstream media, to the extent that there's one, does not appreciate that. Has not fully internalized that Republicans have given up, have ceded that ground.
Yeah.
Like they've ceded the ground on the deficit. Like there's, like occasionally you hear people say it, but like broadly speaking, it doesn't seem to be, there still seems to me, like I feel like if Donald Trump got hit by a bus tomorrow.
Right.
And Mike Pence became president, and Paul Ryan could articulate things that, boom, everything would just like snap back in place.
Yeah.
Like it would just happen overnight. And all of a sudden, everyone would pretend like Republicans care about deficits, really.
Yeah.
And they think the market is a better place.
I wonder about that. I noticed that just in my industry, Ryan's reputation is really taking a hit right now. You mentioned his name, and there's a snicker that didn't used to be there because the guy did. How many awards has he accepted for being a champion of deficit reduction, all that? And he didn't. I think the debt will have ended up quintupling from when he got elected to when he's going to leave office. So there's more skepticism in the press. I think what there is instead is the constant desire to have everything, like a level, like you're building a shelf. And, okay, well, the right's doing this. What Democrats are doing must be the opposite of that. And I feel like Republicans have allowed the social spending, those sorts of things. That's left the plane because they're not fighting on it anymore. They are fighting on cultural issues, things like that. And you do see more media coverage kind of saying, well, less in the last few months, but the Mark Lilla thing of, well, maybe Democrats should admit they have a point. Maybe there's too much immigration, things like that. They moved the ball on cultural issues, what America should look like, not on libertarian economic ideas. They've kind of given up. The only libertarian ideas they're getting anywhere are marijuana legalization and not putting people in jail forever.
Right.
That's it. Like the economic ideas,
which are coincidentally also left-wing ideas.
And when it comes with, that's true. And when it comes to like Ryan's agenda, he will leave office, I think, with a reputation as a fraud. I'll use that word. Who didn't actually believe in the deficit. The idea that they've lowered taxes so much and that you can never raise them again, I think that's going to be tested because this will be a couple tax cuts in a row that were not that popular, but a new and bolder Democratic Party that is not going to. I don't think you're going to have the same economic advisors you had with Obama, who were terribly worried about looking like you're raising taxes on the rich too much.
Right. All right. Well, let me ask you this. I noticed the last couple of pieces you've written about special election in Ohio, Tennessee primaries. The GOP's moving to the right.
Yeah. Well, that's all these candidates are running on work requirements, for example. It's like, and Tennessee's a great example where Republicans run everything. The current Republican governor is like conservative, but kind of maybe we should expand Medicaid, and his replacement in the primary is going to be far to the right. Yeah.
What's happening in that Ohio special election? How important is that? And in terms of a bellwether, I guess.
It's a perfect bellwether, actually, because if the polls are right and the Republican wins by 2 points, it would be a swing and 10 points toward the Democrat, which I will tell you would be enough. The district it's this gerrymander that, this will sound great on the radio, but it's kind of the northern suburbs of Columbus, where John Kasich lives. all country clubs. You drive from one country club to another, maybe like a gas station in between, and then up to Mansfield, Ohio, which is kind of poor, forgotten industrial town. Then the other direction over to Zanesville, which is another poor, forgotten industrial town. Those places got more Trumpy in 2016, and the suburbs got way more Democratic. Like Hillary won the Franklin County, which is Columbus. She won that blowout, biggest Democratic victory there ever. And so the race is basically, there's a lot of country like this because Republicans drew these maps saying, well, the country club, suburban mom, she's with us forever. Right. As long as we got all these types of white people join hands and vote for us.
We're a big umbrella. Yes. We have both white people living up there and white people living over here.
Both white and taupe. And so they know they're losing that section as bad as they did, maybe worse in 2016. Like the early voting has been 4-1 Democratic in Franklin County. It should be like 50-50. They might overcome it with the rest of the districts. But like that's the bellwether is if they blow it up in the suburbs there, even if they lose, the Democrats, even if they lose, that's a lot of the country that they win the election by winning. Does it help like a Heidi Heitkamp? Not really. Does it help the person who in like the Andy Kim in New Jersey, who has a lot of suburbs where people thought, maybe it's not on the map. That is has much less of a right-wing right-wing rural component in this district. So people are going to look at the suburbs. Like election night, Delaware and Franklin County. If Delaware goes Democratic, Democrats win. If it's like a minor loss, like a 5-point loss, that'll be continuing on what happened every special election this year. That'll indicate, okay, the people who didn't love Trump but stayed home or didn't vote for Hillary, they're winnable for Democrats. And there's evidence of this. I think Axios Morning Consult had the polling. There's a type of voter called the the Never Hillary Independent, where they did not love Trump. They're the person who got quoted all over the place in 2016, like, both choices suck. I wish there was a third party, yada, yada, yada. If they're voting Democratic, that really cracks the lock on like 40, 50 districts. Do the Democrats win them all? No, but that means all those guys are under pressure.
And it feels like because of that, because of the gerrymandering and the presumption that we will never lose this demographic and that demographic, and they've lost that demographic.
Yeah.
That's why we could see such disparity in terms of how many seats picked up in the House as opposed to the Senate.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, because it's a fluke of the map that it's, West Virginia, Montana, North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana are way more Republican in the country as a whole, way more rural in the country as a whole. And Democrats are competitive in all those places, but not doing as well as just the random congressmen in the suburbs of like Jersey City. Like those guys are blowing it up. And the difference is there are just rural voters who are still happy with Trump. This is why the trade war has been the only kind of new dice roll in this game this year, because that is the first thing that has told a rural voter who has maybe voted Republican for the last 5-6 elections that there's something wrong and they might not vote Republican this year. Everything else is, the trends from 2016 seem to just be advancing, and Ohio 12 is a good example of that.
What do you think about what Senate races should we be looking at as we get closer? I mean, I assume like we're entering, maybe we're a month or so out from polls that are starting to look at like who's actually going to vote,
right,
as opposed to who could vote. What should we be looking at this point, from your sense, in terms of the Senate? What races should we be looking at to get a sense if there's a possibility the Democrats could take the Senate?
Oh, the first one would be Arizona and Nevada, because these are places that have been getting more Democratic, but there's not yet proof of Democrats voting off year. They had really bad 2010s, pretty bad 2014s. 2010 so bad in Arizona that like Raul Grijalva almost lost. Just Democrats did not vote. They had a special election in the Phoenix area that Democrats got way closer than they should have. So if that continues, and also if Democrats are in that state willing to vote for Kirstjen Sinema, who's gone out of her way to piss off leftists on a lot of issues,
right,
that'll say this is an important factor. Because I think some of the most effective Republican work is convincing liberals to stay home. some of the best like psyops on Twitter that, on Facebook that the Trump campaign used was like, hey, black voters, here's Hillary saying super predators. Here's it again. Here's it in your feed. Just think about maybe staying home. If those voters aren't staying home in Phoenix and Tucson, that's really good for Democrats. Indiana and Missouri are interesting because there's not really a reason why they should be moving more Democratic. They used to be, 20 years ago they were competitive. They weren't competitive in 2016. If Democrats are voting there, it's going to be telling. And of those, Missouri had another race, Kansas City suburbs, 2 months ago. State Senate seat opened up, and Democrats won it by 16 points when they'd been losing it by 20.
Wow.
If that happens, what honest Republicans will tell you, Wisconsin is kind of fun too because it's fallen off the map for a lot of people. That was supposed to be a competitive race. But every election that happens in Wisconsin this cycle, Democrats are turning, every single Democrat comes out to vote. Republicans kind of stay home, and swing voters are going for the Democrat. People thought for a while Scott Walker was kind of bluffing when he'd say there's a blue wave coming, we have to watch out. It was like, okay, that's a great way. It's like those emails you get before the fundraising quarter. Sam, I'm worried. Sam, I'm going to die. I need $100. No, he's legit worried because they built a machine that works in midterms, and it works if there's a Democrat like Hillary Clinton who people don't want to vote for. No offense, you know what I mean. It is not working right now, especially because Wisconsin, you're likely going to have an African-American candidate for lieutenant governor, Mandela Barnes from Milwaukee. They're going to be watching that because Milwaukee going to sleep on 16 was enormous. If Milwaukee's turning out again, you just have a lot of cross currents. I haven't mentioned anything great for Republicans. I would still look at some rural elections. Look at North Dakota because there's nothing Heidi Heitkamp could do wrong. Nothing else that she could do. I would say she has taken every position that is popular in the state, and she's like in a dogfight, probably down the polls right now. So that might be a sense of our future, where even people don't. Rural voters don't want to vote for Democrats just because they're in the tribe now.
What about Florida? I keep hearing stories about Bill Nelson screwing this up royally, being lazy about not going to Puerto Rico, not having any mechanism to register any new Puerto Rican votes.
It's the last part that actually matters. So he's been pretty good on the Puerto Rico issue, and the mayor of San Juan's endorsing his campaign in Puerto Rican communities. It's more, they had a long ramp up to create. So the Florida Democratic Party has not been good for like 20 years. It's good when Obama's a candidate and organizing people. It's bad apart from that. They had a party chair who resigned in a kind of Me Too scandal. They had an executive director who also quit because she wasn't good at it. So you had a party that was not knocking it together, and you've had kind of Latino Victory Fund, a lot of third-party groups coming into the state to say, all right, you screwed it up. We've only got like $1 million. We're going to use it all to register Black and Latino voters. And so you kind of watch the registration patterns there to see if they woke up. When it comes to the horse race between Nelson and Scott, like they'll end up probably being, Scott will probably outspend him on the air by a lot. Democrats have reserved, the last I heard, the Senate majority PAC is reserving like most of its buys, maybe $20 million for Florida, because they're like, well, this is the reality we live in. Rick Scott has infinite money. If we cannot abandon Bill Nelson. Republicans have been telling themselves that they're going to cut bait on him at some point, just give up, because they did in 2016. Very different to give up on an incumbent senator who should be winning that against a Republican who has a ton of vulnerabilities. So I'd watch that, but I'd first look at the early voting for the primary, which is starting basically now, and the registration, because Democrat registration has been falling off. I mean, Scott in particular has been taking measures to knock people off the rolls and purge them. If they're reversing that, then watch it. If they're blowing that, then not going to be a good election for them.
You mentioned, like, just briefly, like that PSYOPs of Facebook. Have you heard of any? I've heard of a rumor that there was some experiment done during the Doug Jones race in Alabama. You heard anything
Which
about
side?
that?
On the
That the Democrats tried to do that with Moyer. Now, obviously, they had that there was some...
I know what you're talking about. I didn't see it myself. I was there a lot, and I didn't see it. I did see them doing, like, trying out new targeting techniques for Black voters and only for Black voters. That was very successful. I didn't see them saying... I mean, I don't think...
Trying the voting suppression.
I'm not saying they're all amazing people. I don't think the Democratic Party just it would not be consistent for the people at the main party level to do things that would suppress votes. It would be a scandal inside the party in a way it's not for Republicans. So I haven't seen it. I mean, I don't want to miss it
By
if it happens.
suppress votes, I mean just dampen turnout numbers.
Just say, don't bother showing up.
Right. Going on Facebook and just targeting people with anti-Moore messages, maybe. I don't know. I'm just curious. All right.
Oh, a little bit of that, but not like your polling place has been moved. No.
That's
I think that's the thing they won't do. They will do stuff that's, hey, suburban woman who is pro-choice but hated Hillary. Here's a crazy Trump judicial nominee. Do you really want to vote for, Mike Brown to appoint more of these? I think they'll do that. I think it'll be maybe you don't like our party, but you should stay home.
All right, last question, because you mentioned Milwaukee. Has anybody done, to your knowledge, a follow-up on that sort of often cited December 2016 Milwaukee piece where they went to, the barbershop and asked African-American voters, did you go out? And they're like, no, I didn't care.
No.
That type of thing. Has anybody done a follow-up?
I don't think so.
I would love to hear.
That's a really good story for someone to do.
What those barbers say. I was just curious.
I mean, I've met the non-voters I met who've come back out are generally kind of comfortable white voters who just thought the choices sucked.
Right.
I've not met black voters who felt there was no difference. I've seen no black enthusiasm for Trump compared to, they love talking about it, but I mean, in Michigan they might.
Are you serious? Are you telling me that there aren't really?
No.
What?
No, it's.
Wait a second, because I follow Dave Rubin and Bill Mitchell, and between the two of them,
the original Soul Brothers.
Are you not aware of the change that is taking over in this country?
The walk away movement from this bot to those other 5,000 bots. For 50,000 stock footage photos can't be wrong. No, I've seen very little. I was in Detroit for 3 days, which is very parachutey, but kind of an open secret there among no one feels compelled. No one feels. I mean, frankly, because I think Trump had an insight during the election that, hey, the unemployment rate doesn't mean everyone's feeling good.
Right.
Healthcare costs too much. You have to work 2 jobs, et cetera, et cetera. He could say that. They kind of forgot to keep doing that. They're just telling everything that the economy is amazing, and that does not resonate in a lot of places.
Interesting. Well, Dave Weigel, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Awesome, thank you.
Really appreciate it. Dave Weigel, everybody.